Hi, Rod King, Washington Grand Company, and I'm here to talk to you again about my favorite ancient medieval game, Triumph. Today I'm just going to do a short video. I have the table set up to actually play out a battle in 15 millimeter, but I'm going to do a short video with some 20 millimeter figures talking about withdrawing from combat and withdrawing from front, flank, and rear contact because a question came up on the site, and I thought it was worth clarifying, make sure everybody understands the rules. And I'm going to use these miniatures I have on the table in front of me to go over that. And then the next video is probably going to be New Kingdom Egyptians versus Sea People. And then we're gearing up for the Grand Triumph Battle of Hastings. So I hope you enjoy the video. Stay with me and watch, and we'll answer a couple questions. Okay, so we're covering page 22 and 23 in the rule book, section 44 through 47, which is breaking off from contact. So in the book, we describe contact as you can have front contact and you can have flank or rear contact when it comes to combat. So in Triumph, you can have, remember we talked about the fact that because of the scale of the figures, you can have what we call incidental contact. So just because your bases are touching, that doesn't mean that you actually have combat. Normally combat is only initiated when you have full front corner-to-corner contact. This represents combat. When the front of a base is covering the entire flank of a base, so this represents combat. And of course, when you're covering the rear, this represents combat. But these are different kinds of contact, and so there's different rules for how you can or cannot withdraw. So let's cover the most straight up one first of all, which is section 44. So if I want to break off from close combat, and I have front contact, so the horsebow is in front contact with these heavy or elite foot, and the horsebow would like to break off from contact. So there's lots of situations where fast-moving cavalry like this gets into front combat with the elite cab or elite foot. It doesn't want to be there anymore. It wants to pull away. If you are faster than the enemy that you're facing, you can pull away. So the horsebow, being with a movement speed of 8, is much, much faster than the elite foot. Okay, so they have the option to withdraw from combat. But to do that, they have to, first of all, not have anybody on their flank. So, for example, they can't be surrounded and break off. Okay, but in this situation here, where they're simply facing the elite foot frontally, because they're faster, they can withdraw from combat, but they have to move at least 3 MU. So their minimum movement would be 3, and it has to be straight back away from the enemy. And of course, they can't collide with anything before they would move that 3 MU. So, and they can't end up when they withdraw in contact with another enemy. Okay, so they can't pull back and hit somebody else. They have to move directly away. They have to go at least 3 MU. They could go their entire movement, so they could pull back their entire 8 MU movement and get away from the elite foot. Now, the elite foot does not have that option in this situation because the elite foot is not faster than the horsebow, so that's not an option. So that's kind of section 44. 45, breaking off from close combat, flank contact, and I'm also going to cover rear contact. So another thing that's important too is, and I should cover this before I go to that section, if this was a unit that would normally pursue like warband or knights, so for example, if the horsebow withdrew from the knights would actually pursue, even though they wouldn't catch. They'd pursue at base depth. Okay, so that's another thing that breaking off from contact can be used by things like horsebow, javelin cavalry, is to yank knights, for example, out of line. By withdrawing from combat, you force the knights to pull forward. It's actually a pretty good trick when you're working with these large horse armies. So let's talk about 45. 45 is flank or rear. So let's say you have this situation. The horsebow have contacted the knights in the flank, and for whatever reason, the horsebow would like to withdraw. Because they're in flank contact, there is really no restriction on them for withdrawing. and they can withdraw at any time. However, what's interesting about flank contact is the knights won't pursue in this situation. So if the horsebow were to pull back, the knights are not going to pursue to the flank. The other thing is that if we had this situation, remember the elite foot could not withdraw from the horsebow in the previous situation, but now the elite foot are attacking the horsebow on the flank. The elite foot can withdraw. They still have to go their 3 MU movement. So the elite foot would still have to go back a full 3 MU from their starting point. But they can withdraw even though they're slower because they were fighting on the flank. Same thing applies for the rear. So if they're hit in the rear, the elite foot can withdraw, but they have to go 3 MU. Knights, normally slower than the horsebow, could also withdraw, but they have to go 3 MU. And once again, the same situation applies. If hit in the flank, if these horsebow decided to withdraw from these knights, the knights will not pursue like they normally would with frontal contact. So breaking off from flank or rear is basically the same as front, except that it's a little bit easier, so even slower troops can do it. And the unit will not pursue, even if it would normally pursue. The last one is 47, and it's breaking off from flank or rear contact for combat if you're fighting to the flank or rear. So, for example, this is a little bit different. If the horsebow is fighting the knights, and the knights have hit them in the flank, they don't have the option to break off. Okay, so they cannot pull away or pull back. What they can do, the only move that they can make is if you spend the command pips, they can turn and face. Okay, so they don't have the option to break off in this position. Same thing applies for the rear position. They don't have the option to break off from the rear position because they're fighting to their rear. Okay, now they can turn and spin around and face. Now, if they're still alive after this combat and they're still in contact with the knights, now they can withdraw. And so what this represents is that getting hit in the flank or the rear is a lot worse than being the one that's hitting the flank or the rear as far as your ability to withdraw or decide the combat. And remember, too, this is also important. This really comes into play with Horde and Beau Levy, for example. If you're hit in the flank or the rear, you can always use one command pip to turn and face, even if you didn't have enough movement to do that. So you'll find, for example, if you were to hit artillery in the rear, if you were to hit Horde in the rear, and I think Beau Levy as well, they don't actually have the physical movement officially according to the rules because they only move 2 MU to completely spin around and touch their attacker because they're a square base. But this is the one exception where they can exceed their movement in order to do an about face and face the guys that are attacking them. So that is the difference between withdrawing from combat from frontal, flank or rear, or trying to withdraw from combat if you've been hit in the flank or rear. I hope that clears that up if there are any questions on it. And once again, this game's Triumph. And I hope you're enjoying the videos, and we're going to get a couple more battle videos out real soon. I just got to film them and then get them produced. So bear with us, and we'll have a few more out in the next couple of weeks. Thanks.